Thalira sat on a broken wooden crate, her knees pulled close to her chest. The cold metal plate on her lap held a few pieces of leftover bread and something green she couldn't name. She didn't complain, she never did. She just stared at the wall in front of her, pretending not to hear the laughter behind her. The main restaurant was full. Beautiful lights floated above the dining area, and alien families enjoyed their warm meals on glowing plates. Servers moved fast, bringing spicy dishes and sweet drinks to the tables, but no one looked at her. No one asked if she needed anything. She was not allowed to sit inside. Not because she was dangerous, not because she was sick, but because she was a mix. Half Rocky, half Gale, a bloodline they called dirty, an unwanted mix of two races that once went to war. The restaurant allowed her to eat only because she worked their cleaning tables, washing floors, carrying garbage. They gave her leftovers. They told her to eat outside, near the bins. Away from the customers, she heard a child ask loudly, "Mama, why is that girl eating with the rats?" The mother replied in a sharp whisper, "Don't look at her. She's a mistake." Thalira's fingers tightened around her plate, but she said nothing. Not a word. She had learned that silence was safer. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her plate. She looked up quickly, eyes wide, expecting another insult. But it wasn't one of the staff. It wasn't a local at all. It was a human, tall, wearing a simple brown jacket, with a pack over one shoulder and boots covered in dust. He looked down at her, not with disgust or pity, but confusion. He saw the food, the spot near the trash, the girl sitting all alone. Then he looked back toward the restaurant. As if trying to understand what he was seeing, he didn't speak. He simply turned around and walked back inside. Thalira blinked, confused. She waited for someone to come out and shout at her. Maybe laugh, maybe throw something, but no one did. A minute passed, maybe two. Then he returned. The human came back carrying a full, fresh meal on a clean plate. Steam rose from it, grilled meat, roasted roots, a small fruit dessert on the side. He sat down beside her, right there on the cold stone floor. Back against the wall, and without saying anything, he began to eat. The sounds around them changed. The music inside the restaurant faded, as if someone had turned down the volume. Voices stopped, forks were held in midair. People were staring. One woman gasped loudly, "He's sitting with her." Another said, "Is he mad? Doesn't he know what she is?" A server rushed outside. "Sir, please, you can't sit there. That area is not for guests." The human didn't even look at him. He just took another bite. Then he looked at Thalira and asked softly, "What's your name?" Thalira froze. No one had asked her that in a long time. She looked at him carefully, trying to see if this was some kind of joke. But his eyes were calm, patient, warm. "Thalira," she whispered, her voice rough and small. He nodded and replied, "Nice to meet you, Thalira. I'm Jack." She couldn't understand why her heart was beating so fast. No one had ever spoken her name with respect. Not once, not ever. Inside the restaurant, anger was building. The manager stormed out, red-faced and shaking. "You can't do this," he snapped at Jack. "You are breaking cultural codes. You are disrespecting this place." "Our traditions," Jack looked at him calmly and said, "Your tradition is to make a girl eat near garbage." The manager replied, "She is a half-breed. She is lucky we let her eat it all." Jack stood up slowly, towering over the manager. "I've seen many ugly things in my life," he said quietly. "But this is new then." Without another word, he turned back to Thalira and held out his hand. She stared at it, then at the people watching. Her hands shook, but she reached out. When she touched his hand, a ripple spread through the crowd like lightning. Whispers turned into shouts, some in anger, some in awe. But Jack didn't care. And Thalira for the first time felt like she didn't care either. She stood beside him, plate in hand, and walked back inside. Every step felt like a storm. People moved away. Some gasped, some cursed. Jack found an empty table and sat down. Thalira followed, heart pounding, eyes burning. He placed her plate beside his own and said, "Eat here." That one simple act shook the walls of the restaurant and far beyond. In places of power where names like hers were never spoken, someone took notice, and they did not like it. Thalira didn't know how to sit at a real table. Not like this one, with soft lighting, real plates, and fresh bread on the side. She kept looking around, as if someone would come and drag her out, but no one moved. People just stared, like they were seeing something impossible. Jack, the human, didn't seem to care about the eyes around them. He sat calmly, eating slowly, enjoying every bite. Now and then, he looked at her and smiled. A simple smile that didn't ask for anything. But she didn't touch her food. She just sat stiff, breathing fast, heart pounding. Then a hand slammed on their table. It was the same server from before, now shaking with anger. "Sir, leave now," he hissed. "You are causing a scene." Jack wiped his mouth and looked up. "I'm eating like everyone else," he replied. "Is that a problem?" The server's eyes flicked toward Thalira. "She's not allowed in this area." "She is," Jack cut in. "She is eating like me. Like all of them." His voice was calm, but something in it made the server step back. The manager appeared, again whispering something to another worker who disappeared into the back room quickly. Thalira could feel it in the air pressure. Danger. Her hands were shaking, and her breath caught in her throat. Jack leaned closer and spoke gently. "If you want to leave, I'll walk with you. But if you want to stay, I'll stay too." She looked at him, her eyes wide, unsure if he was real. No one had ever offered her a choice before. She reached for her fork slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the plate, and finally, she took a bite. It was warm, full of flavor, something she had never tasted before. And when she looked up again, Jack was smiling, not because she obeyed, but because she finally ate. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed from the back of the restaurant. Two tall officials in dark uniforms walked in, their faces hidden under shining masks. "Cultural enforcement," the crowd whispered. Chairs scraped. Some people stood to move away. The officials came straight to Jack and Thalira's table. "You have violated Protocol 7A, human," one said, voice cold and mechanical. Jack didn't blink. "I shared a meal with someone who was hungry," he answered. The second officer added, "Your action has disrespected the local caste purity laws." Jack looked at them, then at the crowd watching, and spoke louder. "I respected someone more than your laws do." A few gasps came from nearby tables. One child laughed before her mother hushed her. The officers stepped back and turned to Thalira by witnessing and accepting this act. "You two are now subject to questioning." Thalira dropped her fork, the sound sharp and loud. She stood up quickly, not sure what to do, but Jack stood first, between her and the officers. "Question me then," he said. "But she stays here." The officers signaled toward the door. "You will come with us now." Jack turned to Thalira, whispering softly, "Don't run, don't be afraid, just wait." Then he followed them, straight-backed, without handcuffs, without fear. The crowd parted as he passed. Everyone watching, but no one speaking. Thalira stood alone by the table, her hands shaking, her food cold. Someone in the back said, "Stupid human, he'll regret this." Someone else added, "It was just a half-breed girl. Why risk so much?" But then, someone said quietly, "She looked happy." And that one voice, soft as it was, stuck in the air longer than all the others. Thalira sat again. Slowly, she didn't touch the food. Not anymore. She just looked at the empty space, where Jack had been, and for the first time, she felt something strange inside her chest. Not fear, not shame, not pain. Hope. a tiny flame that hadn't lived in her for many years and far away. In a dark marble room on the top floors of the Cultural Authority Tower, someone watched the whole thing on a screen. A counselor with silver eyes leaned forward. He tapped a button, recording the footage, then whispered, "Find the human. Bring him to me." The room smelled of metal and silence. Jack stood between the two cultural enforcement officers, hands free, but watched closely. The walls were smooth, polished like glass, glowing faintly with cold blue light. No windows, no clocks, just emptiness, and the quiet sound of machines breathing somewhere behind the walls. He wasn't scared. He had seen war, seen death, seen things that broke the souls of braver men. But this place, this system built on quiet cruelty, made his blood stir in a different way. They didn't shoot people. They erased them, bit by bit. A door hissed open and a tall figure entered, wearing black robes lined with gold. Her eyes were silver, her expression unreadable. She walked slowly, like she had all the time in the world. She sat down across from Jack and folded her hands. "You've caused quite a storm, Earthman," she said in a calm, polished voice. Jack tilted his head. "You make storms easy to start." Her lips curved into a thin smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "She is a nothing girl," she continued. "A mistake of bloodlines, a product of shame. She is a person." Jack replied, voice steady, "And she deserves to eat without a wall between her and the world." The silver-eyed woman leaned back and studied him. "Why you?" she asked. "Why would a human from a distant system care what happens to a half-breed girl on a planet that doesn't even belong to you?" Jack didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then slowly back up. "When I was young, I watched a child die in the mud while nobles rode past on clean horses," he said. "They called him less than. Because of where he came from, no one stopped. I didn't stop either. Not that day," he took a breath, "but I swore the next time I saw it, I would." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You understand your actions may trigger social instability," she said. "You understand this planet functions because of structure, because of respect for rank and blood." Jack stood up slowly, his voice calm but cold. "Then maybe your structure needs to fall." Alarms didn't go off. Guards didn't rush in. But something in the air shifted, like invisible knives being drawn. The woman stood too, her robe brushing the floor. "You may go," she said sharply. For now, outside the building, the city felt louder than before. Drones flew overhead. Newsboards flashed headlines in every language. Outworld human challenges council law mixed blood girl at center of controversy. Some called him brave. Others called him foolish. Some just wanted him gone. Thalira sat inside a tiny back room behind a bakery, where an old alien woman had offered her shelter for the night. The woman didn't say much, but gave her food and a warm blanket. Thalira kept staring at the door, waiting. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind the buildings. Still, no Jack. Her fingers traced the edge of the old blanket. She remembered the feel of the table, the taste of warm meat, and she remembered his hand, the strength in it, the way he didn't flinch when the world turned against them. Then the door creaked. She jumped up, eyes wide, but it wasn't Jack. It was a young boy, dirty, thin, wearing a delivery uniform. He held out a paper, his hands shaking. "Message," he said, and ran off. She opened the paper carefully. It had only one sentence, written in messy human script. "Don't be afraid. I'm still with you." She held the paper against her chest like it was made of gold. And somewhere deep in the city, Jack walked through a crowd that parted like water. People looked at him with curiosity, some with anger, others with something near respect. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to keep a promise. But what he didn't know yet, what neither of them knew, was that their story had already become something far bigger, far more dangerous, and the next step would cost more than either of them expected. Asterisk, the alley was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the skin crawl. Jack stood near a low wall, speaking softly to someone in the shadows. The voice that answered him was sharp, full of warning. "You've pushed too far, human," it said. "The council doesn't forget this kind of challenge." Jack replied, "I don't care if they remember me. I care if they remember her." The figure stepped into the light, revealing an alien with a cybernetic eye and a limp in his left leg. His name was Brannick, once a respected pilot. Now forgotten after refusing to join the caste patrol, he looked at Jack for a long moment, then tossed him a small glowing disc. "You didn't hear this from me," Brannick said, and walked away. Without another word, back in the bakery, Thalira was washing plates with shaky hands. The old woman who sheltered her, Marnu, watched her silently. "You shouldn't have returned here," Marnu said finally. "They'll come for you." Thalira nodded slowly. "They'll come anyway. I'm tired of hiding." Marnu let out a tired breath, then handed Thalira a small cloth bag. Inside, "Our old things from your mother's side," she said. "Your father left them here before he vanished." Thalira opened the bag with trembling fingers, finding a crest made of two metals fused together, one rocky, one gale. It shimmered strangely, as if the metals still rejected each other even now, but it was beautiful, and it belonged to her later that night. Jack stood in the middle of an abandoned train station, placing the disc Brannick gave him into a hidden console. A hologram blinked to life-old security footage. Private messages, financial records, all connected to the council. He wasn't looking for blackmail, he was looking for truth, and the truth was ugly. The caste laws weren't just tradition. They were business, slavery, under a clean name. Forced labor from the unworthy, profit built on bloodlines and silence. And Thalira's existence threatened that machine. If people saw her as human, if they cared, then the machine would break. Jack copied the data, hid backups in cloud nodes across the outer colonies. He didn't plan to bring down a government. But now it was clear. The moment he sat beside Thalira, he lit a match. Now the fire was growing. Outside the bakery, two masked figures watched from the shadows. One whispered, "Wait until the human returns." The other replied, "If he doesn't." "Take the girl anyway." Inside, Thalira sat near the small oven, holding the crest close. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. Not just a cleaner, not just a mistake, something more. And if Jack could risk everything to defend that, maybe she could too. Suddenly, someone knocked on the back door 3 short taps. One long Thalira ran to open it, heart racing. But it wasn't Jack. It was a boy again, the same one from before. Breathless and holding a wrapped bundle, he handed it to her and ran, disappearing into the dark. Inside the bundle was a coat, Jack's coat, heavy and warm, with a note tucked into the pocket. "Put this on. Don't wait for me. Head to Brannick's dock at dawn." Thalira didn't know if she should cry or smile. But she slipped the coat on anyway and whispered to herself, "I'll find you, above the city." A storm was forming, not clouds, not rain, but whispers, rumors, sparks. The story of a human who sat beside a half-blood girl was spreading beyond control, and in every corner of the system, the question began to rise. If one human could stand, why not me? The sky was still dark when Thalira stepped out. Jack's coat hung loose on her thin frame, brushing against her knees as she moved quickly through the back alleys. The city was waking slowly, lights flickering on above shops, drones humming in the air. But this part of town, the lower docks, was different. Quiet, dangerous, and forgotten. Just like her, she followed the path Jack had marked on the back of the note. Each turn was sharp, each step filled with doubt. But she didn't stop, not after what he'd done for her. At the far end of a broken transit line, Brannick waited beside an old cargo shuttle that looked like it hadn't flown in years. He saw her coming and gave a small nod. No guards followed. "You?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't think so." Brannick grunted, opening the hatch for her. Inside, the shuttle was dark and cold, filled with crates and old data terminals. Thalira sat on one of the boxes, hands folded tightly. Brannick tossed her a small energy bar and said, "Eat. We might be here a while, somewhere far above them." The council chamber buzzed with angry voices. The footage from Jack's stolen files had leaked. Screens across the planet now flashed words that had never been allowed before. Caste, fraud, blood purity, lies, slave contracts hidden by law, one council member shouted. "Shut it down now," another said. "The people are listening. We can't stop it this time." In the center of the chamber, the silver-eyed woman stood calmly. She didn't panic, didn't shout. Instead, she tapped a single button and said, "Find the girl." Jack was already moving. He had made deals with smugglers, talked to underground networks, even contacted an old rebel cell that once tried to change the system with fire and lost. Now they were watching again, curious about this strange human who didn't ask for power, just justice. He knew where Thalira would be, but getting there wasn't easy. Security gates had doubled, patrols were everywhere, and his name was now flagged on every scanner in the city. Still, he moved through the crowds like smoke, always one step ahead. He wasn't just fighting for her anymore. He was fighting for all of them. Thalira watched Brannick fix a terminal with shaking hands. "You helped my father once," she said quietly. Brannick paused, then nodded. He was a fool, but a brave one. He believed things could change. Thalira held up the crest from her cloth bag. "Do you think he was right?" Before Brannick could answer, the outer sensors beeped. A ship had landed nearby, not a council one. Not marked. Then came footsteps, slow and careful. Brannick moved to the hatch, holding a small blaster just in case. Thalira stayed still, heart pounding. The hatch opened. It was Jack, covered in dust, his shirt torn at the shoulder. But smiling, Thalira jumped down from the crate, running toward him without a word. He opened his arms just in time, catching her as she nearly crashed into him. Neither of them spoke at first. There was no need. Finally, Jack looked at Brannick. "We need to go now." Brannick nodded and powered up the shuttle, engines groaning to life as they lifted off the ground. Thalira looked out the small window. She saw lights in the distance, council flyers approaching fast, but it didn't matter. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was flying. The crest in her hand gleamed in the light, and Jack's hand rested gently over hers. Two pieces of a broken world now moving toward something new. They didn't know what would come next, but they would face it together. And somewhere behind them, in a city choking on its own silence, a crowd began to chant a new name. Not Jack, not Thalira, just one. Word: Hope, asterisk. The shuttle shook as it climbed through the low clouds. Steam hissed from the side vents. Lights blinked red and green in the dark cockpit. Jack kept one hand on the controls while the other tapped fast on a screen. They were being followed. 2 council patrol flyers had locked on, and more were likely coming. Thalira sat behind him, gripping the edges of her seat. She tried not to show fear, but her chest was tight and her breath came short. Jack glanced back, saw her pale face, and spoke softly. "This isn't the end," he said. "Just the hard part before the change." Brannick was working beside him, rerouting the power lines through the old cargo ports. The shuttle wasn't built for speed, but Brannick was doing things that shouldn't even be possible with such an old ship. Thalira watched the stars appear one by one as they rose higher. It was the first time she had ever seen them without city smoke or blinking ads in the sky, and even now, with fear chasing her, they looked beautiful. The warning alarm blared suddenly. One of the council ships had fired. The bolt missed by inches, lighting up the night sky with a sharp blue flash. Brannick cursed. Jack turned hard to the left. The ship groaning in protest, Thalira closed her eyes and whispered a name she hadn't said in years, her mother's name. Then she opened them again and stood up. Walking toward the cockpit, Jack tried to tell her to stay down, but she shook her head. "I have to do something," she said, her voice trembling but clear. She held out the crest. The strange, fused Rocky Gale symbol. Brannick frowned. "That's just an old family piece." "It won't help now." "No," she said. "It's more than that." She placed it into a small circular slot near the nav core. The ship paused for half a second, like it was remembering something. Then the engine lights flickered white, and the ship jumped forward with sudden force. The console lit up with symbols none of them had seen before. Jack stared. "What did you just do?" Thalira blinked. I don't know. But the ship knew. It belonged to her bloodline, one that had been buried, erased, forgotten by law, but not by the stars. They broke through the upper atmosphere just as the patrol ships lost lock. The enemy ships hovered, confused, unable to follow into the upper lanes without a council beacon. The shuttle drifted into silent space, floating between stars, safe for now. Jack turned to Thalira slowly. "You're not just a symbol anymore," he said. "You're a key." She didn't understand everything, but she knew something deep inside had just shifted. Her blood, once called shameful, was now opening doors others couldn't even see. They floated in silence for a few moments. The weight of escape finally settling in, Brannick let out a long breath and sat back. That crest. "It's not just family," he muttered. "It's ancient tech. Mixed bloodlines were once sacred, long ago." When the Rocky and Gale worked together in peace, Jack looked at Thalira. Then they feared the Union so much, they rewrote history. She touched the crest again. "Holding it tight, they made me eat near trash because of this," she said softly. Jack replied, "Now they'll beg for a seat at your table." Somewhere behind them, the council was scrambling. The signal from the old shuttle was gone, but the message it left behind wasn't. Dozens of young mixed bloods had already started speaking out. Shops were refusing the caste system. Guards were stepping down. The city wasn't burning. It was waking up, and at the center of it all was a girl who was never supposed to matter, and a human who decided that she did. Together, they watched the stars ahead, not running anymore, but heading toward something that might change everything. The sky above the city turned silver that morning, not from clouds, not from ships, but from millions of small screens lighting up at once. Every home, every corner, every public wall, each one now showed the same image: Thalira standing beside Jack, holding the crest in her hand. Behind them, the stars, and below them, the words that echoed across every speaker. "I will no longer eat near your trash bins." Was never trash. The council called it a terrorist message, but the people called it truth, from the lower sectors to the tall towers. Something ancient and heavy began to break inside the main council tower. Chaos roared. Meetings collapsed. Old alliances snapped like weak thread. The silver-eyed woman stood alone in her chamber. Watching the footage play over and over, she whispered to herself, "The girl should have disappeared." But the girl didn't. She flew. Thalira and Jack landed the shuttle in the old ruins of the Unity Bridge, a place once built by both Rocky and Gale during the short era of peace. No one had walked there in years, not since the war. Now crowds were gathering, walking miles, just to see the girl who stood against the bloodlines. Jack stood at her side as always, arms folded, face calm but ready. He didn't speak much anymore. He let Thalira speak. It was her voice the world needed now, not his. She stepped forward, her feet touching the ancient stone. The old broken symbols beneath her glowed faintly, as if the bridge itself remembered. She looked at the crowd and raised her hand. They didn't cheer, they didn't scream, they waited. And she said, "You were told we were dirty. You were told we were shame." But what they feared was never our weakness. They feared our strength. They feared what would happen if we stood together. The silence cracked. Then one voice shouted, "I have Gale blood too." Another screamed, "My mother hid my marks." And another, "I was always afraid, but not anymore." The air filled with voices, hundreds, then thousands. The bridge shook not from machines but from the weight of change. Jack reached out and took Thalara's hand again. She didn't flinch, she held it tight. The council sent a message to stop the gathering. They offered apologies, fake reforms, promises, but no one listened. Because they remembered the girl eating by the trash bins, and the human who sat beside her when no one else did. Soon, shops changed signs. Temples removed caste-only seating, schools opened doors to all, and the phrase written under her image became law in the outer colonies. Our dignity does not come from blood, it comes from courage years past. The world didn't become perfect, but it became better. Children who once walked alone now ran with others. Walls came down. Names like Thalira were spoken with pride, not shame. And in a quiet garden outside the new Peace Hall, two chairs sat side by side. One belonged to a human, the other to a girl once called unclean, now called something far greater. Leader, symbol. Hope, she never asked to be those things. She only wanted a place at the table. But when no one gave it, she built her own, and the galaxy never forgot it.